And we're going to call this meeting of the Senate Public Safety Committee to order. Thank you for everyone who is in attendance. We do have a quorum at this time, and without any advance notice, I'm going to ask Senator Payne if he'd open us up in a word of prayer.
Be honest to you. Please join me in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for every opportunity you give to us, Lord, including this day, including the breath of life that filled each of our lungs this day, because the breath of life comes with purpose. Lord, we just ask that purpose that you give to us, that we would always serve you in everything that we do. Just lead us and guide us in all the matters before us, that your will be done. For it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. And following devotion, we're going to talk about decorum. We have a couple of bills that we will be hearing and voting upon today that may have some passions arise from folks. The wonderful part about living in the great state of Georgia and our great republic in the United States of America is we get to have an open, honest dialogue. But that is one that is done with kindness and professionalism in the Public Safety Committee. So those of us who are here in the audience today, there is no comment or noise or anything else from those who are sitting in the audience. However, we have a sign-up sheet if you would like to speak for or against the bill. Please note, you must complete the entire form to be recognized, and when you are recognized, I'll ask you to come up to the podium over there. Based on the amount of people that signed up, we will have to limit the amount of time for each person in order to make sure everybody has an opportunity to speak. So understand that if you speak a little over and you keep going and we have to stop the mic, you will be taking time away from somebody else's opportunity to talk. So please be cognizant of that and courteous to the folks that are also here to talk. The last thing I will say is please do not come up and say the same thing that the person before you or the person after them is going to say. In fact, I would encourage you to pull together and maybe send up one or two spokespersons who may be speaking for or against the bill so they can have a couple of minutes in order to get all that information clearly and accurately given to the committee members. We do want to hear from you. We want to make sure we do that in a way that's pleasing toward everyone. So thank you for your attention to that. We're going to begin to continue Senate Bill 21 from Chairman Tillery. Chairman Tillery, if you want to come forward for a moment. You, please, you sit right there. I'm going to have you sit there because we're going to have some people testify at the podium. We have a committee sub in your folder, and very quickly I want to thank Chairman Tillery for his great work on this, and especially Ms. Kate Alexander in our Legislative Counsel office, where we actually found that there was some duplicative language that was passed last year on House Bill 1105. And with that, we cleaned that up. The bill actually substantially is the same, because some of that language is already there. But Senator Tillery, do you want to just say a few words, and then we'll bring up some folks who want to comment on your bill?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 21 and the amendment, or the amended version committee substitute that you have presented before you today, is really, really simple in its concept. Georgia has immigration laws. A lot of them were passed in House Bill 1105 that we enacted last biennium. All that Senate Bill 21 says is if a local government or a local government official does not enforce Georgia immigration law, that they waive their sovereign immunity and are open to civil suit from anything that may fall from not following Georgia immigration law. The substitute just clarifies and cleans up some language that was already passed in Senate Bill 1105 or House Bill 1105. The substance of the Senate substitute is verbatim the same.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And you've got both the old and the new version in your folders. This was also emailed to all committee members yesterday evening, so everyone have a copy. And I want to make sure you understand we're all working from LC 570224S. Is that what you have, Mr. Chairman?
Let's see here. I had a different LC number, but if you got the 57 one, it could have just meant that I grabbed the wrong one out of the.
All right, we'll make sure you have a copy.
At 49295 2159S, but I can deal with.
2159S.
I did.
I believe we have a newer version. We're going to get you a copy.
Please do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Any questions for Chairman Tillery before we take some public testimony? Seeing none. All right, first up on our list, no stranger to our committee or Capitol, Mr. Mac Parnell. Why don't you come on down to the podium, please, sir?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and thank you so much to Senator Tillery for bringing this important legislation. On February 22nd of 2024, last year, I was across the street in the CLOB and I got a call from our policy analyst about 1 p.m. informing me that his his sister's college roommate had been murdered on UGA's campus. Her name was Laken Riley, and I know many of you are familiar with her story and the tragic events that transpired. The Georgia Faith and Freedom Coalition is in support of this legislation, making sure that Georgia law is upheld when it comes to immigration enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mac. A horrible and avoidable tragedy. All right, next up, is it Bez Rengifo? Did I say that right? If I mispronounced your name, my apologies.
Thank you, honorable senators and members of the committee. My name is Bez Rengifo, and I am the secretary of the Latino Caucus. While the murder of anybody is tragic, this is a little bit confusing when I'm talking this legislation, SB 21, and it does sound a little bit duplicative when I'm talking with my deputy sheriff friends, and they're a little bit now wondering how is this going to affect them, that their sovereign immunity is going to be lifted, and that anybody could go after them in civil court. So my question is, how is this going to be implemented?
Okay, sir, this is not an forum
Okay.
for you to ask us questions. It's for you to provide testimony, please.
Okay, all right. So in regards to the Latino people here in the state of Georgia and across the nation, we have a group that's $3.7 trillion in GDP. We are 40% of the workforce growth, and this doesn't feel good to our people. You know, here in the state of Georgia, we're the second largest importer of farm agricultural visas at 43,000 per year. This legislation is very confusing, and we're not in support of it at all. It just seems like a beatdown, just another legislation against the immigrants here in the state of Georgia and across the nation. So those are we would like for you to reconsider it. You already have 1105 there. We don't see a need to keep pouring it on with SB 21.
Thank you, Bez. I appreciate your comments. I just want to make sure we clarify something. You can please seat it, don't worry. I don't think anyone speaks for an entire community. In fact, our majority caucus chairman, Jason Anavatarte, and several Latino groups fully support this legislation. All right, next up, Mr. DJ Waller from GMA.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm DJ Waller with Georgia Municipal Association. We represent all 537 cities in the great state of Georgia. We just had a question about a line in the bill, a concern. It says that in the event that a local governing body acts in violation, the sovereign immunity will be waived. I don't know if that's been changed with the sub. We're just trying to asking what is a violation? Is it merely an accusation, or it has to be a conviction? So that was our main concern.
I appreciate that. Again, we don't take questions from the podium, but we love your comments, and I'm sure that Chairman Tillery can turn around and have a quick conversation to alleviate any of your concerns, DJ. Thank you. All right, Mr. Todd Edwards from ACCG.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Todd Edwards, Association of County Commissioners of Georgia. House Bill 1105, as mentioned before, was enacted last year, and it already did enact penalties for those cities and counties violating, the sanctuary, the laws of the state. That's had about 9 months. Our first recommendation would be to perhaps allow that a little long time to play out to see if that is in fact an effective deterrence for the would-be cities and counties that would enact sanctuary policies. I realize that's not very likely, so moving forward, we did have a few recommendations for enhancement of this bill. One of the language that concerned our attorneys was the fact that the Senate recommends that clarifying that any immunity waiver only applies to the specific local government individual or official that violates the law. As you all know, on this committee, county commissioners, board of commissioners have no direct control over sheriffs, other constitutional officers. It would help us clarify that only those who violate it are impacted or waive the sovereign immunity. That's in the first section. In the second section, some of the similar concerns we have, but we would like to see that there be a cap, like say 48 hours, on the amount of time that we can hold individuals or detainees, suspected detainees, or after their scheduled release date. I think that's current federal policy. It may be changed with the new administration, but right now holding them any longer than those 48 hours is a concern that we'd be subject to liability and lawsuits, which would further cost taxpayer money.
Thank you, Todd. I appreciate your comments as always. Let me just make sure I clarify. On your
Yes, sir.
first point, I understand that there's a difference between county commissioners, chairman, and the sheriff's office, but who appropriates the dollars?
You're absolutely right. Ultimately, it'll come back to the county and the county taxpayer, sir, that would be subject to the penalties entailed in this act.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Edwards? Seeing none, thank you, sir. All right, next, Mike Mitchell with the Georgia Sheriff's Association.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Mike Mitchell. I'm the Deputy Director at the Georgia Sheriff's Association. We are the voice for the 159 sheriffs throughout the state of Georgia. Our current position at the moment on Senate Bill 21 is neutral. It still has a ways to go, so we want to continue evaluating throughout the process. But I will say, and it's already been referred to today, with House Bill 1105 last year, a lot of these mandates are already in place. In fact, they're criminalized. So the sheriffs are already adhering to those standards, and they also have to report annually to the Department of Audits that they're in compliance with those mandates.
I've got a question, if you would mind, from our Vice Chairman, Senator Robertson.
Hey, Mike, I appreciate you coming today, and I appreciate your members. Do you notice any difference in the legislation you're reading here today and the legislation you referenced from last year?
No, in fact, in speaking with Chairman Tillery, I think it's the same language from last year.
Okay, so this doesn't do anything that was done last year in the way you're reading it?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
I think, Mike, I'm not sure how well you have been able to read this legislation, but it certainly does add some significant changes. In House Bill 1105 last year, which I sponsored in the Senate, thank you for working with you, Terry, and the other agencies. That was, as you mentioned, criminalizing penalties. I believe that Chairman Tillery's bill here that we're talking about, to make sure we're very crystal clear, is if they do not follow that and other areas that would be considered sanctuary policies, then in fact they would be losing their sovereign immunity.
Correct.
Which would be different than just criminalizing a penalty.
Right. We do understand that.
Okay, I want to make sure. All right. Other questions for Mike? Before you leave, thank you to all the amazing work that our sheriffs do throughout the state each and every day to keep our families safe.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank
we
you.
appreciate you.
Okay, next up, I've got Miss Stephanie Tanner. Come on down.
Hi, I am Stephanie Tanner with the Georgia School Boards Association, representing members from all 180 public school districts in the state. And I'll be quick with 3 simple points. First, our members have brought us a legislative position urging you all not to waive sovereign immunity. We share the concerns about sovereign immunity being waived for the local government as well as the officials and employees. And then second, like other local governments, we want some clarification on what qualifies as a violation. Is that just an accusation or a conviction? And then third, just want to be clear that we're not aware of any school districts that have sanctuary policies, and of course would not advise them to adopt them. We tell them to seek legal counsel and follow all state and federal laws. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie, and I'm sure we want everyone to do just that, just follow the law. And the old adage goes true. My parents told me when I was a kid, if you follow the law, you got nothing to worry about. Thank you. All right, and last but not least, we've got Miss Megan, and your name is done so well here, I can't even read it.
Funny story, my sister has always teased me for my handwriting, and literally wouldn't let me help her write her wedding invitations. This is 15 years ago. I'm still mad. She said, the post office won't be able to read your handwriting, so I'm going to do them all myself.
All right.
And I'm going to tell her she was right. Hi, my name is Megan Gordon. I work for the Georgia chapter of the Council on American Islamic Relations, and I'm going to be brief, but I'm afraid not as brief as everyone ahead of me, because I want to take y'all on a journey through existing law and how it creates some complicated interactions with SB 21, because our existing definition of sanctuary policies are actually much broader than people expect. If y'all want to follow along, if you're as nerdy as I am, you can come with me through code section 36-80-23, because I want to talk about the definition of sanctuary policies, which is, as I said, broader than folks might expect. Usually when we hear that, we think about like a local governing body, city of Atlanta, a school board, a county, basically saying, we hate ICE, you can't come in here, right? But the definition, if you look at the law, is quoting the relevant portion, any regulation, rule, policy, or practice that prohibits or restricts the local officials or employees from cooperating with federal immigration enforcement. The key word I want y'all to hold on there is practice. So what that means is that if even teachers or school counselors who are employees of the state or their local government adopt a simple practice of not volunteering the status of their undocumented students or undocumented family members if they learn them, they would be in violation of the existing sanctuary policy and therefore have this immunity waiver under 21 and therefore be open to a lawsuit. And so there's reasons why they might do this, primarily because educators can't do their job if students and families don't trust them, but they also have existing legal obligations under a SCOTUS case called Playa Liberty Doe that I'm not an expert in, but I can get y'all more information if you want it. I'm sure it's not the sponsors or anyone's goal to create some massive liabilities here for teachers and law enforcement or educators, but because the existing law includes basically the teachers, counselors just kind of doing a thing because they recognize that it's a bad idea without anyone passing anything. No one has to write it down. No one has to do a thing officially. That would put them in violation of the existing law. And then they get hit with these penalties under 21. So I think this needs a lot more thought, unless you want to enact some consequences that I don't think y'all actually want to enact, because I know we all care about teachers.
You do have a quick question
Yes,
from
sir.
Senator Robertson.
Hey, how are you today?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm doing well. Or have you ever worked in an area where you wrote policy, say HR policy or anything like that for a company or a government agency or anything?
No, sir.
Okay. Are you familiar that there's one thing that supersedes written policy that is called consistent practice?
Yes, sir.
That open myself up to liability if I put out a policy and procedure manual and I tell all my employees that this is the way you do it. But my employees choose to do it another way, and I don't correct those employees. Then that practice becomes policy. Therefore, when Attorney Blake Tillery or Attorney Brian Strickland come in and file civil action against me, I can walk in there with a paper policy and say, this is my policy. I did not violate. And they'd say, no, so not quite so easy, Mr. Robertson. See, you allowed a practice to go on within your company, within your government agency, that became the accepted practice, thereby became the policy. So you're absolutely right when you point out the word practice in the code section. And as a major in the sheriff's department, where I was a supervisor, I was responsible for the practice of every single employee, the captains, the lieutenants, the sergeants, the deputies, the correctional officers. I was responsible to make sure that everybody adhered to policy and nobody adopted their own practice. Now, from a civil standpoint, don't you think that would be a responsible way to run a company or a government agency, thereby avoiding certain penalties that are mentioned in Senator Tillery's bill, or avoid certain problems that could be presented to me by the good Senator Strickland's law firm?
Well, yes, but respectfully, Senator, that sort of circles us back to the same problem, which is that you create issues in schools because
Who's responsible for the school district, local public school district?
your Department of Education.
Where does the buck stop?
With the Department of Education. But
No,
the-
no, ma'am. The buck stops with the superintendent.
I see what you mean.
You're right. Who's responsible to make sure every policy within their policy and procedure manual is followed to the letter?
Well, that's not the point I'm trying to make.
No, no, ma'am. That's the point I'm trying to make. You went to the word practice, and I appreciate that because you're correct. But the thing about it is that's how you define practice, where you said practice could be hard to, everybody's practices. If I'm the superintendent, then every teacher, every student aide, and everybody else adheres to the policy of whatever school district I'm the superintendent of, period. That is how you follow it, and that is how businesses, that is how governments avoid running sideways with legislation like this. Thank you.
Question from Senator Jackson, number 2. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just thank you for your testimony, Ms. Gordon. I want to make sure I'm understanding clearly. Today, it seems, my understanding is that it is the practice of our public school systems to not collect the immigration status of any student, because under federal law, all students, all children are allowed to have a public education, regardless of documented status. And so it is the practice, and because of federal law, like that is the policy, right, that schools do not collect the information about whether or not a student is undocumented. It could come up in the course of a class that a student might reveal to a teacher that they are undocumented or they have an undocumented parent, just in the course of the conversation. Again, the current practice would be that teachers don't act on that because kids are entitled to an education here in the state of Georgia, right? And so what I think I'm hearing you say is that if we were to pass this law as it is written, because our sanctuary laws are so broad, the teacher who chooses not to reveal to ICE, I guess, that child or that child's parents is undocumented, that could be considered having sanctuary for that child and therefore make them in violation of that law. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, ma'am. And it's also, that teacher would actually be complying with their legal obligations under the 1981 or 2 Supreme Court case, Plyler v. Doe, in which the Supreme Court ruled, as you referenced, that every student, regardless of their immigration status, has a right to a K-12 education. So it would actually be a violation of their current legal obligations to reveal that data. So this is really putting them in a rock and a hard place. And I acknowledge that that's sort of, they're already there with existing state law, but also now we're adding the penalties with 21, so it's complicated. But this is really putting them in a rock and a hard place because they cannot both comply with Plyler and with 21 in the situation you just described.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but I respectfully disagree. The right to education versus them following the law are two totally different things. Thank you for your testimony today. We appreciate it. Okay, that was everyone who signed up. Chairman Tilbury, I'm going to give you a chance to close out, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask a question of Legislative Council first, if you don't mind.
Certainly.
First, Legislative Council, in House Bill 1105, it was, I believe, pretty clear that participation with the 287G program was required, and participation, obviously, the feds have to grant the 287G program, or grant your inclusion in it. In the bottom of that, I mentioned to you, there is a thing that says a local agency shall seek such memorandums of understanding from immigration enforcement concerning 287G annually. We passed this bill last year. Does that annually mean they should have done it in 2024, or do they have a full 365 days to participate in that, or do you know the answer to that?
Based on my read of it, Senator, I'm looking at lines.
I'm sorry, Kate, can I ask you to come up to the microphone over here for us, please? Thank you.
Of course. Thank you.
This is Miss Kate Alexander, one of our legislative council members.
Yes. All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, based on my read of this, and again, I didn't draft HB 1105, but from what I can tell, based on the effective date provision, Senator, on lines, I think 450 through 451, it basically indicates that, except as provided for 4 in subsection B, which this does not apply, that it would be effective upon the approval of the signature of the governor. The governor signed 1105 on May 1st of 2024. So my reading and assessment would basically say that they've got it up until May 1 of this year to comply.
And then each additional year until May 1, every 365 days thereafter. Thank you for that clarity. It's going to help when I explain why, so answer some of the questions here, so appreciate that clarity. Members of the committee, again, I think there was a comment made that this bill is confusing. This bill is 3 pages long. The 3rd page says all laws and parts of laws in conflict with this act are repealed. If you take that one sentence off, this is a 2-page bill. It is not confusing at all. There is a requirement in Georgia law already that local governments and local government officials abide by Georgia immigration law. You heard from Legislative Council already that they have to apply to be in the 287G program annually, and you heard a clarification of why that is. There may be some that aren't. If they aren't complying, then they are running the risk of waiving sovereign immunity if you pass this bill. There are already criminal provisions that are enacted, but this waives their sovereign immunity as their local government, and it hits them in the pocketbook. The next question that came forward was, what is a violation? A violation is not complying with Georgia law. How is that proven? It's proven under Title IX already. You have a duty. You have a breach of that duty. That breach causes a harm, and the harm results because of the breach. That means that someone had to get hurt because of a violation of Georgia immigration law for someone to be able to bring this claim. That is not confusing. I really do appreciate ACCG's recommendations. I will work with them through this process to make sure that it's clear which government official violated the law and left their citizens open to these funds being taken. And I'll work with them throughout this process. I heard the red herring we always hear, we're not aware of this happening in Georgia. Great. Then this shouldn't be a problem. If it is happening in Georgia, that's why you hear so much squealing. I appreciate Ms. Gordon's comments from the Islamic Council. She mentioned the word practice and pointed you to OCGA 368023. There were a few words, though, when she read that definition that she left off. She said sanctuary policy means any regulation, rule, policy, or practice. The next part after practice says adopted by a local government body. If a one-off citizen, if a teacher is acting in some way that's against policy and the superintendent, as Senator Robertson mentioned, steps in and corrects that policy, there is not a violation by the local governing body, and there therefore is no waiver of the sovereign immunity. I hope I've answered all your questions. I appreciate the time, and I also appreciate all the comments. I'll answer any other questions you have, Mr. Chairman.
Well, first, just let me thank you for bringing this bill forward and bringing clarity to some misunderstandings. Any final questions for Chairman Tillery? Senator Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you speak specifically to the issue that Ms. Gordon brought up around teachers and schools having an obligation to provide K through 12 education regardless of documentation status? That would be a practice. It would be a policy, that's actually handed to us through the federal government. So can you speak to how that interplays with the current law that we have? Because I could make the argument that they're currently violating the law, but then now this would open them up to civil penalties, is my understanding.
Senator, I think there is a very strong argument that there may currently be violating the law. And let's talk through that. What the policy in 1105 said was that a sanctuary, the definition of a sanctuary policy was any regulation, rule, policy, or practice, we've already went through that, adopted by a local governing body, we talked about through Senator Robertson's bill how that can be done, how a practice can be adopted, which prohibits or restricts local officials or employees from, and this is the only new language that we put in 1105, complying with an immigration detainer notice.
Gotcha.
The old language said, or cooperating with federal officials or local government officials regarding to reporting immigration status. That was the law long before 2024. So if that was an issue then, that was nothing that this legislature, even in its last biennial, changed.
Further questions? Seeing none, what is the pleasure of the committee?
Well, Mr. Chairman, as a proud husband of a second-generation American and a proud father of a first-generation American, I move due pass.
All right, we've got a due pass from Senator Robertson, LC 570224S. Do I have a second? You got a second. I have a second from Senator Bearden. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All opposed, please like sign. 2, 3. Bill passed and moved forward. Best wishes in the Rules Committee. Chairman Tillery, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to move on now. We're going to skip in the agenda to Senate Bill 64. Senator Dixon, I think I saw you toward the back of the room there. Oh, there you are. Perfect. Wonderful. Always great to see you here at our committee. Glad to have you in front of us for this important piece of legislation. And I think we had nobody sign up to speak on that bill, if I'm correct. We had nobody, so the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. I appreciate y'all letting me bring forward Senate Bill 64. Simply what it does is it would prohibit the state and local governments from purchasing unmanned aircraft, drones, from Chinese-owned companies, and prohibits companies owned by foreign adversaries from submitting bids or proposals for contracts either directly or through a third party to state government for technology products such as computers and printers. And this is a bipartisan issue. President Biden, in December of last year, he signed the National Defense Authorization Act, which is looking into two of the largest Chinese-owned drone companies where the U.S. government has bought some of those drones, and they've got a year to determine if they're a national security threat.
Thank you, Senator. Excellent piece of legislation to protect us here in the homeland. Questions from the committee members? Question from Senator Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just quick question. Do you know what the conclusion of that year determination has been? Like, has it been determined that Chinese drones are a threat to the United States at this time?
Yeah, so he signed that in December of 2024, so they have till December of 2025 to make those determinations.
So can you speak to why we're not waiting to learn the outcome of that, and like what's the urgency around this bill?
I think it's a security issue in the state of Georgia. When you've got the biggest firm that from the Chinese owned companies, DJI. They have actually, and it's been documented, that they blocked in their software where drones, where typically drones are blocked where they can't fly over government buildings or airports or military facilities, and that software has been removed, and they have found that.
I think in addition, if I could just add to the author's comments, we've also had, I want to say the numbers in the hundreds now of hacking incidents directly from both the Chinese government and Russian government and their affiliates to American governments, both at the federal, state, and local level. So
of drones specifically?
Well, not drones, but in general, having any type of things that are trying to surveil us and or to take our data, equipment, pictures, things of that nature.
And then my final question, if I may, do you know, are there enough other companies that manufacture drones that are not from this list of adversarial states to cover our needs? Are there enough kind of U.S. American companies, quite frankly, that could cover our needs for drones if we were to enact this bill?
Yes, there are several companies that are American-owned. One of the larger ones that comes to mind is Brink. It's a larger company, and I don't think there would be any issues as far as manufacturing. I mean, we are America by the way, but yes, there are American options and Georgia-owned companies. So if the state of Georgia is going to be contracting with folks, we would prefer them. I would prefer them to be a Georgia-owned company that we're spending thousands of dollars on drones or technology other than one of our foreign adversaries.
We, in fact, had Wing, a drone company here that flew around this Capitol yesterday, so that was good timing.
Another good company.
Good question. All right. question from Vice Chairman Robertson.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Senator Dixon. Senator Dixon, on line 48 through 53, you identify what a foreign adversary means. Could you tell me how you came up with that list?
Yeah, it was, oh goodness, I'm trying to remember.
Is
where
that based on federal
Yes, sir, it is.
terminations? Okay.
It is.
And I thought so when I noticed E, where we name actually an individual as a foreign adversary. So I just wanted to clarify that I was reading that correctly.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
I got a question from Senator Goodman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of years ago, Congressman Sanford Bishop and Congressman Austin Scott, Republican and Democrat, they put together a briefing for us in the Atlanta office of the FBI for folks in the ag community, specifically talking about the threat that our country has from the Chinese government. I'm not talking about the Chinese people, I'm talking about the Chinese government. And I think that anyone in an elective office or in a leadership position should really learn that, because I came away, it really opened my eyes, you know. I think sometimes in Washington there's almost like more consensus about this issue than maybe there is in Atlanta, and I think maybe that is because they do have more access to intelligence than from our intelligence services than what we do. But it is a serious issue, a national security issue facing our country. I've made folders for senators in the past on all the stuff that I learned. I mean, I took a deep dive into this, and it is really scary. And I just want to say, Mr. Chairman, at the appropriate time, I'd like to make a motion to pass Senator Dixon's bill.
All right, we got one more question, and then I'm going to recognize you. Senator Strickland, what number are you there? 9, okay.
As the only lawyer on the committee, I guess I'll ask a lawyer question. Getting back to who asked about foreign adversaries, given that we're going to put this in code if it passes, is it better to reference a federal statute that identifies foreign adversaries or some sort of other way versus Georgia having to go back and amend it? It's a drafting question. I don't believe you wrote it. I'm not sure if there's a place that could be done. It's just a drafting question. Because in the future, if not, if we make peace with one of these people, we have an individual listed, they're gone. If we want to add more adversaries, we don't usually get in.
I believe, Chairman Strickland, I think in your committee in the past, some of these bills have come through and we've referenced that exact foreign adversary by the federal government, have we not?
I don't know. I can't remember, to be honest with you. There's probably a way to do it. I don't know if the bill has to be held up today for that. We could do it as a floor amendment if we figure it out. It's just a suggestion.
Yeah, I'd be happy to look and work with you on that.
Okay. All right. Further questions? If not, I'm going to recognize Senator Goodman for Senate Bill 64 LC 550433.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to pass on Senate Bill 64.
And a motion do pass. Do I have a second? Got a second from Senator Payne. Any further discussion from the committee members? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed? All right, one opposed. Thank you so much. Best of luck in the Senate Rules Committee, Chairman Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Next up, we're going to have Senate Bill 7. We began testimony on this, and unfortunately, I apologize to those who came both for Senate Bill 7 and 21. On Monday, we lost this room. We have a little more time today, thankfully, though. We've got 4 people signed up to speak on this bill, so I'm going to ask you to pull that back out. You should have in front of you LC 473188. And we're going to begin with Fulton County Sheriff, Sheriff Abbott, if you wouldn't mind coming up to the podium, sir.
All right, good afternoon. I appreciate you all having us back. Mr. Chair and Vice Chair, I appreciate the many opportunities you all have taken to delve into this opportunity. And we don't have problems at Fulton County, we have opportunities. So that said, having watched the hearing on Monday or your meeting on Monday, there were some things that I want to make sure were accurate. Starting with the fact that we asked for the Atlanta City Detention Center, we asked for the original agreement. By we, I mean the Fulton County Sheriff's Office. And so in doing so, we also asked the other 159 sheriffs via the Georgia Sheriff's Association, if you had 1 bed, 10 beds, 1,000 beds, we needed your help reducing the population at 901 Rice Street. If you recall, when we came into my first term, the administration itself, we had 3,600 individuals, 600 people sleeping on the floor. We have, as recognized by this committee, have done yeoman's work, getting the population reduced nearly 1,000, and so we appreciate our partners there. Speaking directly to the MOU, I do want to push back on my good friend over at Chief Dancy over at ACDC. I know his team is here as well. Most of you, if not, I will tell you, I've been at this 36 years, and 31 of those years I spent at ACDC in the last 10 and last decade of my career there as the chief. That building was designed to hold the most violent prisoners, inmates, detainees, whatever you wanted to call them. We contracted with ICE, we contracted with the marshals. We've had as many as 1,400 MS-13 gang members in that facility. The facility is direct supervision in and of itself. I wanted to get rid of the myth that the facility itself is not what makes the culture. The culture is the direct supervision in terms of how we treat people. And so, as you know, we've had, and the committee has done the study, we've had our fair opportunities to really partner with our Board of Commissioners and the like. We have made strides in that area. I thought it important to do two things this morning. One, see if there were any further questions with respect to both either ACDC from a past lens that I worked through, as well as the current administration that we got through that process. And then secondly, given the vice chair's start to public service and his expertise, we did recently have an opening in our command staff. So if you want to come on back, we'd be glad to have you. So all that said and done, I do want to see if there are any questions, something that went untouched, and we are certainly available to you.
You can have them after sine die.
Got a real quick question.
What we get in return for the trade.
That's very, very wise counsel. All right, we'll begin with the man of the hour, Vice Chairman Robertson.
Yeah, I think what I would do is I would gain a job and lose a wife if I went back into that job, which I got to tell you, I love that job. But the proposal to take over or to take possession of the detention center, where are you on that? Do you support that, Sheriff?
So I support both our mayor and our chairman. I've asked originally, and so let me be fair in that statement. I lived through Mayor Franklin's $30 million proposal. I lived through Mayor Reed's $85 million proposal. I understand the evaluation on the jail now is north of $100 million. There is some opportunity there for us to gain more space. And that goes back to Senator Halpern's question on Monday, which is we have 700 beds, but as you know, we staff the facility. And so I have said early on in my first term, and I remain there, the addition of ACDC, we could do a lot better, right? We could do a lot better with respect to mental health populations if we owned it, because there are barriers to just moving an entire population over there. So I'm in the middle, right? I know our chairman has said what a nominal fee appears to be with respect to the current environment, but ultimately I stay out of that piece, right?
Right.
If you ask me as a sheriff,
Yes.
I'd like to have it, right?
And that was my question. And do you feel that you and Chairman Pitts are on the same sheet of music when it comes to the importance of having that facility as a part of your assets to address the issues you have now?
Chairman Pitts and I are rarely on the same sheet of music.
And I asked that question knowing that.
Right. However, we do agree that to have an additional asset, right? How we arrive there is something that we can work through the minutia of. But I have assured people in every conversation that we've had that the individuals at ACDC would not lose a job, right? There is a path forward there. They could become part of the sheriff's office. If they're under the old pension plan, they could remain city workers. We are in agreement that that would be an asset.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
And just following up on that as well, I have spoken to the chairman, most of the commissioners, county manager, and other folks, and I think everyone is very much in alignment of needing to do that. So, all right. Any other questions? All right. Vera, for second question, Senator Wicks.
Good afternoon, and thank you for coming.
Yes, ma'am.
You spoke on mental health, and mental health is big for me in reference to, can you elaborate on your plan in reference to the inmate and their mental health and the resources that you speak upon?
So, first of all, thank you, and I appreciate that. Mental health, as we've really discussed numerous times here, has fallen back into a space where, well, regretfully, and unfortunately, into a space where the largest provider of mental health in the state and across the country has become our jails. And so while we are not totally equipped to handle that as a staff, as a team, we do have contracted employees for that. Ultimately, I have to say in a fair conversation, gaining ACDC as an asset does not solve the Fulton County problem. We have a cultural change that needs to take place. One of the conversations earlier this week was around mental health, was around linear supervision, around direct supervision, and so all of those play a huge part in that space. To be able to have a direct supervisional environment where most of our mental health population resides will actually create a safer environment. And so that's where we would start. That would be an opportunity for us. Here is part of the problem, though, under the current MOU, and we are working through this piece. And I think Senator Halpern mentioned this on Monday. We have a great relationship with both the city and even our commissioners, to the chairman's point, want to see nothing but progress in these spaces. We have to unlock the hinge that says that only certain people can come to the Atlanta City Detention Center. And once we do that, there are additional resources and space for resources to amplify that as well. Part of the opportunity here is that we provide the staff at ACDC. We contract with Cobb, for instance, but Cobb in and of itself have their own staff. And so that is the ongoing opportunity for us to, one, do a better job recruiting, right? The DOJ report, it's important to note, too, as you have, many of you have read through the DOJ report, the DOJ report did not focus on whether the county needs a new jail or not. That wasn't the purpose. The purpose was to focus on mental health, to focus on how we treat individuals, recruitment and retention. What does that look like? And unfortunately, as many of you already know, we're all fishing from the same pool. And so we just lost 3 people last week to the Atlanta school police. And that's because of a pension problem. And those are things that we have talked about as well. But going back to that question directly, the more staff we can retain, recruit, and really focus on mental health and do some of the things. One of the things I'd love to see, and it certainly may not be in this legislative cycle, but we talk about co-responders when it comes to police and deputies being out in the street. We need to have a co-responder model for the jail itself. But again, that will take funding, and there's an opportunity right there to have an immediate, direct impact on mental health.
Thank you very much. Senator, okay. Senator Halpern, number 3. Yeah, go ahead.
Hello.
Hey,
Thank you.
good afternoon.
Thank you, Sheriff, for being here. This might not be the right question for you, but do you, right now as it stands today, and let me back up and say, back in 2021, when we were having a mayoral race, I stood up in the well and I challenged every mayoral candidate to open back up the Atlanta Detention Center. And the victor of that race, our mayor, Andre Dickens, did win. And in 2022, he opened it back up, and you've got the intergovernmental agreement, and you guys are working that through and continuing to figure out how to continue to make that work in the ways that it needs to, despite the fact that it expires at the end of next year. So those conversations are already taking place. I personally do like the idea of giving you the ability to separate your detainees, and you talked about putting everybody that needs mental health or behavioral health in one space versus intermingling them. So my question for you is this, and it might be twofold. Are you doing any of that now with the beds that you have, and or do you believe that that issue would actually need to be studied more to know that that would work, given the fact that your funding, your ability to hire more people, rest at the county? And when you've asked in more recent times for those additional funds to bring on more support, to provide for overtime pay, that has been denied most recently. So help me kind of figure out, because there's a couple of different issues all at play at one time, and I don't know that, while I like the idea always of having you have access to both facilities, I guess my question is, does this actually need more study to determine that it would really work the way that we're envisioning that it would work?
So let me unpack that.
Yes, I know.
All right, no worries, no worries. So I do remember when you stood in the well, asked the mayoral candidates their opinion, where they would be. I do believe that had an impact on where we were. I will tell the committee as a whole, and anybody can fact check me, the City of Atlanta Detention Center was never closed, has never been closed. We reduced the population under Mayor Bottoms with respect to her path and her political outlook and what that was in terms of doing business with ICE, in terms of doing business with whatever the administration is. And to that extent, there are women and men that work over there every single day that protect and serve and work for the City of Atlanta directly, and now we have a large contingency there working for the county as a whole. I don't believe we pause anything at this stage because we're always looking for more space. We're always looking for more opportunities to get it right. The give and take has to be in what will, I hope, be a new MOU. Really, the realization is that in December, when this ends, the average daily cost goes to $150 a person. And so we have to really take a close look at that, figure out how do we move from where we are to having a larger scope of help, a larger scope of really positive outcomes, meaning knowing that there are 22 units over there, knowing that there's one medical unit that has never been used in its operation. There's an opportunity for us to move into that space. Going directly to the Board of Commissioners where we are, as I've said publicly, and you know this, I was elected to fight for the people of Fulton County. We will continue that fight. I do believe that the consent decree will make a difference. When you look at the consent decree, it actually all but orders that the Board of Commissioners and the sheriff and our teams work together to figure out what that will cost to increase retention, to increase recruitment. What does that look like? And then we will continue to focus on that. It will come with a price tag that ultimately, unfortunately, may have to involve a millage rate discussion. What does that look like? So they were very specific, they being the Department of Justice. But it's also important to note that we've had this conversation since 1/1/21, since I took office. And we've been very transparent about it, and that's our goal, is to continue to be. The funding, I believe, at the end of the day, will be, I won't say forced, will be a joint collaborative project that ultimately sees that we have to pay our women and men more. We have to pay them what they're worth. We have to provide them psychological services as well. We have to be able to go out and really focus on mental health, maybe that co-responder piece, funding those kind of opportunities as we continue. And then we have to invest in training. One of the things that I know the committee understands, when you start cutting the budget, one of the first things that goes is training. And so we have to have a serious conversation around what that looks like. So to be honest, I'm excited about, as I said day one when I sat down to testify, I'm excited about having the conversation before you. I don't believe it should be held or halted in any process, just one that is positive for both the city, the county, and ultimately the citizens of Fulton County.
Thank you. I just want to clarify something, Sheriff, if I could. You said the rate's going to be at $150 per day. What is the rate you pay to Cobb County?
Right now we pay $80, but that includes staffing, meals, et cetera. We pay the city of Atlanta $50. We actually have to staff the facility as a whole. I believe the $150 was put in place to encourage an exit plan, right? And that was actually said to make sure that we're very thoughtful about making sure the 744 beds we have out of service were brought back online so that we can put people back at either 901 Rice Street or other facilities. So I believe that was how that came about.
So today you're paying $50, but when you add in your costs, that obviously is significantly higher.
Correct.
So you're actually paying more today and will pay extraordinarily more in the future to the city of Atlanta, which is basically the same exact taxpayers robbing Peter to pay Paul as you would to Cobb County.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Question from Senator Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Sheriff Labatt. I appreciate you for being here to just answer questions. I have some questions about what are you doing on your end at Rice Street facility. I mean, you named this yourself. You preempted my question here. So you have beds that are offline today in your facility, 700 and something beds. Interestingly, you have 700 and something beds, 702 beds available to you at ACDC right now today, which are not full because I understand maybe some staffing issues. But what are you doing in your current facility that you do own, that you do control, to get those beds back online so that you wouldn't need, I mean, this is literally apples to apples, right? So that you would no longer need those 700 beds in ACDC.
So first of all, great question. It is not apples to apples. It's apples to oranges, so that we're clear. And grade A apples, if you start talking about the City of Atlanta Detention Center, a facility that is built to change the culture of how we treat people when you talk about direct supervision and what that looks like. I've said quite openly, honestly, and transparently that 901 Rice Street is the Titanic, and it's looking for an iceberg. We found that iceberg. And quite simply, if you recall, as we went through not only the Senate investigation or hearings and the DOJ investigation, the Board of Commissioners also commissioned a $2 million 15-month jail feasibility study. They paid for it. And it said that 80% of the buildings out of life cycles. And so you heard our county manager and our vice chair talk about the Jail Blitz project. Oh, first I failed to mention that the maintenance and the upkeep of the jail does not belong to the sheriff's office. It is the county.
Interesting.
And so hence, people thought I was a little brash when I took 1,500 homemade knives that were being made from the building itself to the Board of Commissioners meeting. And I did that simply to say, if you won't let us, right, if you won't fund us properly to repair the building, if you won't fund us properly to just simply maintain the day-to-day life, I'm going to give you your building back to you piece by piece. And that is what the recognition across the state. And I have to give Governor Kemp and Department of Corrections a really, really huge shout out to be able to invest $600 million into a system that is, you got to keep in mind, the majority of the State Department of Corrections inmates come from where? They come from Fulton County. And those are a younger population, a more violent population that are tearing down our facilities and tearing down facilities across the state. And so to that extent, it's not apples to apples. Because when you talk about direct supervision, right now, you mentioned the 700 beds. Well, they have several large units offline right now. And so as you heard Chief Dancy say, right, really, you can hold 1,314 people at ACDC. But what they have is an operational capacity that allows them to repair zones completely. We don't have that luxury. And so as we go through the jail blitz project that our county manager talked about, by the time we get back to zone 1, zone 2, it's been torn up again. And so it puts us in a position where, again, and I believe our chair talked about that earlier this week, is the building was designed to hold 1,100 people. The day we moved in, we were overcrowded. And so let me equate that a little more on a layman's term. You go to close on your house, and they say, oh, by the way, you got to take everybody in here and their families with you. Because the pipes weren't designed for, it was designed for 1,100 people, not 2,500 people. The electricity and the usage was designed for 1,100 people. The cells had to be double bunked again. The toilets weren't designed. So whereas AC/DC was designed proactively to really focus on this and really house people in it and change the culture of how we did this, that ultimately becomes the difference between the apples and the oranges. And so while we take off beds offline because it's inhumane, not because we're being proactive. And so we bring in a company that can do both, whether it be AC/DC or otherwise. They have the skill set, but then there's the politics of the payment processes. And what does that look like? And so you have less. AC/DC, having been involved in the transition, was built specifically to treat people in a more humane fashion. 901 Rice Street was built to warehouse people. And when you warehouse people, ultimately, they respond accordingly. And so that's our goal, is to figure out how to blend the two so that we do a better job of serving those that are incarcerated.
Okay, one final quick question, because we got to keep going.
Yeah, just so I'm clear, you're stating basically that AC/DC is a better facility in terms of being able to treat people more humanely, better facility in that people are not making 1,500 knives out of the building itself because it's not falling apart. So you're getting a quality product in AC/DC, but you don't want to pay a quality rate for it? Is that what's happening here? Because it's not, you're paying $50 a person and you have to staff it, but AC/DC is now taking on what you have described as more violent people who are likely to try to tear up the jail and make shanks out of it. And so I guess I'm just concerned about why you feel like it's okay to not pay a top rate for a top rate facility.
No, somewhere in translation it's being missed, right? AC/DC is designed with more modern equipment, more, again, the thought process of how you house and provide for individuals, right? Those individuals that are coming over are the same people. They are. Ultimately, what you have is how you treat them. And in doing so, that becomes the opportunity for us to get better. It's never been said that no one wants to pay a fair market price for what that looks like. But ultimately, what is being said is that the majority of people being incarcerated come from the Atlanta Police Department. And so at what point because prior to you taking office in 1988, when we started, everybody that was arrested came through the City of Atlanta Detention Center first. And that created a buffer in terms of you had municipal judges who had state authority to see if there was probable cause, and there was about a 2-week buffer. And then when they were bound over to the state, we took them on as clients at the county. Actually, I was part of the sending to. So we sent 50 to 100 people at a time over to the county, but it gave the county an opportunity to operate. And so does it mean going back to something like that was more efficient and create an environment where those individuals had one opportunity to legal services a little more readily, all the things that occur in terms of binding somebody over and getting them to a judge more quickly? That may be the answer. What I'm saying is I don't mind paying fair market value for anything we do. The fact of the matter is we need to come up with the funding to make it happen.
Thank you. And I just want to clarify a couple of things that was said. Of course, the ADC is much newer. It's 15 plus years newer. The second thing is if the rate at Cobb County, which I think is newer than both, is less, that's certainly a problem. But the last thing is you don't own anything, we don't own anything. the taxpayers own the jail. The taxpayers own both jails, and they have both paid for those jails, and I think that's why we're having these meetings today. All right, Sheriff, we're going to ask you to take a seat for a moment. We may
Thank
ask
you.
a follow-up question of you. Thank you for your time. We're going to bring up Ms. Cheryl Ringer with the Atlanta Law Department. We're going to have to curb our comments a little bit to stay on time here.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Actually, I'm going to curb my comments because I think the sheriff covered a lot of what I wanted to say, and I do appreciate the sheriff's comments and his recognition that the addition of ACDC would not fix all of the issues that the jail has. I think what we have a real concern about is the issue of local control. The bill as it is currently written specifies that if the sheriff were to request, beds at ACDC, then the city shall provide it. So it kind of undercuts the city's negotiation power. And as you know, in the next couple of years, we're going to need to redo the IGA. And so that's something that is of concern to the city. We also are concerned that the IGA does not really take into account Atlanta's vision for justice reform. There is the Atlanta Detention Center that is located on the site of ACDC, and there's questions about what would happen with that particular facility as well. Extending Fulton County's reliance on ACDC detracts from meaningful solutions in the county's own jail crisis. As Sheriff mentioned, we have to address overcrowding and inadequate mental health services and the various violations that were outlined by the DOJ, not just provide an additional asset. There is in the DOJ investigation, there was a mention of segregation that the sheriff is already doing with respect to inmates, and that the women are mainly at are at ACDC, and as outlined in the DOJ investigation, some of the most hardened inmates are at the South facility at the Union City Jail. And so it's not clear that this is necessary to help provide that separation. As the sheriff mentioned as well, we need to not only expand detention space, but to work on a commitment for dealing with systemic changes with regard to training, with regard to providing mental health.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to
Oh, you're fine.
truncate.
I appreciate you doing that for us.
There is a concern that 702 beds have been allocated, and those are not being used now. And so, 360 of those are what's being used. There's an issue with staffing, and so then the provision of additional asset to the sheriff to allow additional beds does not mean that they would be able to utilize them. Again, we need the funding from Fulton County to be able to assist the sheriff in that regard. I think that's all the comments I have at this
Great.
time.
I've got a couple quick questions, and I'm going to turn it over to Senator Robertson. Just want to clarify, do you agree with the sheriff said that the Atlanta Police Department brings the largest majority of prisoners to the jail?
I'm not aware of that. I am aware that the Atlanta Police Department would need to have a jail to bring their detainees to, but I'm not aware of the statistics. I would agree that definitely is a need.
Okay. Next thing is, I heard the talk about the vision that the city has, but isn't it true that just in the last week there's been more than one discussion between Atlanta and Fulton about selling them to jail? So that runs counter to what we're hearing?
I believe that there's been ongoing discussions with regard to just operations at ACDC. So there's been ongoing discussions all the way around. I think the discussions that may have occurred may have been spurred by the legislation that we're talking about.
I certainly hope so. And last but not least, do you think it makes sense that the taxpayers of Atlanta and Fulton County would pay more to house prisoners locally in the Atlanta Detention Center than they would in another county, Cobb County?
I don't believe that makes sense, but I'm not sure that that's exactly what we heard. I do know that the IGA with ACDC does not deal with meals or health care. In fact, meals are brought over from Rice Street, and that's part of the cost. But also, when we talk about the taxpayers of the city, remember this, those taxpayers are paying an additional millage, not just the Fulton County millage. And then we do have those taxpayers that are DeKalb County taxpayers as well.
Certainly. And do you remember what the total percentage is of the tax revenue that's derived from those who live in DeKalb County but also in the city of Atlanta limits?
No, sir, I do not know.
Okay. Would you believe if it's less than 5%?
If you say so, yes, sir, I would believe it.
All right. I'm going to turn it over to Senator Robertson for a question.
Yes, ma'am. You're with the law department here in the city of Atlanta, and I'm sure you're very involved in this process. So what I wanted to ask you, and I heard you say something about, I think, justice reform and some other things that I think are really important that we all want to move forward in. So I'm sure you've been inside ACDC and seen the facility there, and I'm sure you've been inside the Fulton County Jail there on Rice and seen the environment inside of there. Comparing those two environments, which do you think has the greatest opportunity to offer a safer environment and to move toward that criminal justice reform, if you will, and I'll put air quotes around reform because I know a lot of times we can debate what that means. But after looking into both of those facilities, which one of those two would you say fits more into what you and I want to do when it comes to criminal justice reform and taking better care of people being held, citizens being held in these facilities?
Good question. I have not been inside the actual portions of either facility that deal with the inmates. I have seen pictures, though, but I would agree ACDC definitely provides a more humane environment.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for your comments. And we have one more very quick question. We just got to stay on track. Senator Halpern.
As the only Atlanta resident who pays taxes and Fulton County resident who pays taxes on this committee, here's my one question from the city attorney's perspective, because I'm sure you've been tracking this and looking at whether or not there's other examples or precedent of a transfer happening, and so, as far as you know, is there precedent for a transfer, seeing that there is no new city being created, which would then require a change in service delivery?
No, ma'am. There is no other example of this type. And I'm glad you brought up the fact with respect to no new city being created, because what we heard on Monday was in reference to state law. That comes into place when a new city is being created, and that is not what's happening here. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Next up, Blake Feldman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senators. I'm Blake Feldman, Senior Policy Counsel at the Southern Center for Human Rights. This is my first session in this role, and I do want to thank this committee and just the General Assembly more broadly for all of the different study committees and special committees and this subcommittee. My home state, where I'm from, and where I did most of my work before this, wasn't so deliberative, and I really appreciate that and the amount of time that's gone into looking into these issues. The Southern Center opposes this bill, and I am just going to briefly talk about why. So Senate Bill 7, it doesn't address the underlying causes of the long documented unconstitutional and inhumane abuses at the jail. In the DOJ's log report and in the 66-page consent decree, they do things, they comprehensively look at how to address all of these different violations. But the specific ones that I want to talk about are failing to protect people from the substantial risk of serious harm from violence, housing people in conditions that are unsanitary and dangerous, failing to provide adequate medical and mental health services, using solitary confinement in unconstitutional ways, using force without reasonable cause. there were more issues, but all of the ones that I just read, the DOJ specifically linked those to staffing issues, so being understaffed and lack of supervision. So the Fulton County Sheriff's Office has demonstrated that it is unable to safely and effectively and constitutionally house its current population. Through the report, through the subcommittee, you heard about some of these problems. Ms. Joyner from the county testified before the subcommittee that the Sheriff's Department does not have enough staff to operate its own facilities. Also at a subcommittee hearing, Mr. Cotter with the National Institute for Jail Operations testified for almost an hour. He concluded his testimony by saying, the last thing I was just going to show you on here is all of this is going to depend on staffing. Everything revolves around staffing your physical facilities. The Fulton County Sheriff's Office has failed to maintain clean, hygienic, safe facilities, and repairs are not maintained because of lack of staffing. I think the sheriff just discussed the blitz. By the time he comes back around afterwards, after they've repaired, it's in disrepair again. So these same issues of it being dangerous are there again. So just the sheriff incarcerating more people at the Atlanta facility without adequate staffing and supervision, which it is his office's responsibility to provide. And he admits that he has never had adequate staffing. It will only lead to the Atlanta jail its rapid descent into dangerous disrepair also. The DOJ report explained, and this is a quote, until supervision in the jail improves, it is likely to remain in a state of disrepair that fosters violence. Just the last thing that I would say, also the sheriff did tell the subcommittee in May of last year that there should be 50 to 60 staff for each 12-hour shift at the jail, and that the jail has never achieved that staffing level. So just giving access to this entire facility without that being addressed, it's not, there's no reason to believe that this would be a solution. The last thing, which I can't say much on, is just that it does raise questions for financial and legal liability. If the city is owning the facility, they're responsible for maintenance. If the city wants to make sure that people are housed constitutionally, so they're maintaining the facility, more people coming in with inadequate staffing. The cost of maintenance can fluctuate, and there have been instances in the past of the sheriff not paying contractors. So kind of, I think, parsing and understanding in the bill maybe what would happen if there is non-payment. That's just an additional concern.
Thank you, Mr. Feldman. I appreciate your comments today. I will just say that a good majority of what you said, I think, is the exact purpose of this legislation, which addresses it, but I do appreciate your comments. Next, we're going to hear from Mr. DJ Waller. Come on down again. This is going to be our last speaker on this bill.
All right, good afternoon. Again, I'm back. So we know this case is very specific to the city of Atlanta and Fulton County, but we do have concerns. We encourage all of our cities and counties to negotiate and find solutions at the local level, and we try to provide them resources to do so. Our concern is the legislature intervening in those negotiations and setting the terms that may not be comprehensive for all of us. So that's our main concern with this bill. We are really big on local control and the essence of that, and that's why we are opposing this bill.
DJ, great to see you as always. Thank you for coming back up to testify. I have a couple questions for you. Isn't that true that GMA was all in favor of the creation of all the new cities?
I'd like to call on our Director of Government Relations to respond to that.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim Thornton with GMA. Technically, GMA does not take a position on new city creation. We support new cities, but we do not advocate for or against the creation of new cities.
Thank you, Jim. Why don't you stay there? So
Sure.
you did support. We appreciate that. And in fact, I was actually a part of many
Sure.
of those creation of new cities. In fact, many of your team were a part of that. And isn't it true that you were advocating for the transfer of things such as parks and fire stations and police stations and apparatus to the new cities from the county?
That is correct. When a new city is created under state law, the facilities, the infrastructure transfers, as do the responsibilities for maintaining the infrastructure, roads, parks, et cetera. All of that transfers with the creation of the new city.
So when it's a new city, it's okay that everything transfers over from the county, but if it's an existing city, you can't go backwards. Just want to make sure I understand what you're saying.
So I think we're talking about different things here. I think in the creation of a new city, all of those decisions are localized to the creation of the new city, right? The voters of the area of the new city actually get to vote and decide whether or not they want to create the new city. If they do, that property transfers. That's a hyper-localized decision. I think what DJ was referencing with this particular bill is that all of these situations are very complex. With 159 counties, 537 cities, we encourage local solutions, not a statewide solution. Several of the members of the committee served on the Senate, the SLOGO committee, the Local Government Operations Committee. Know that last year we had a lot of discussion about service delivery strategy and those types of negotiations. That's something that GMA and ACCG encourage our cities and counties to find the solution that works best for them. And the concern we have here is the President of the General Assembly coming in to what is essentially a localized negotiation between a local city and a local county and putting their thumb on the scale and picking a winner or a loser in that negotiation, feeling like that's a dangerous precedent that could replicate itself in 159 counties across the state, where local officials who don't like the way a negotiation is going would bring it to you to try to craft a statewide solution. I don't think that's something that the General Assembly really wants to get involved with in that many local decisions. You heard great testimony from the sheriff as well as the city about the complexity of these issues. That plays out in cities and counties across the state, and each of those negotiations takes into account the local considerations, all the various factors. That's what we feel like should be encouraged, not singling out one particular factor and saying this is going to predetermine what that negotiation should look like.
Well, Jim, I certainly appreciate the encourage part, but the irony is we're for it when it's for my city. We're against it when it goes back to the county. It's not lost on me, and I think many of the folks in the committee, just like the folks when we created Sandy Springs, which was the first city that was created in modern times, all the taxpayers just happened to be in Fulton County, even though we went back and forth, and there was a battle royale fight to get those assets and everything over, and legislation had to be updated and changed to do that. Well, what happened? The General Assembly had to weigh in to clarify that, to put its thumb on the scale to help out cities. So what's good for the goose is good for the gander from my perspective. I'd appreciate it. Question from Senator Robertson.
Mayor Thornton is who you'll always be for me, and a good constituent, city of LaGrange. And you and DJ, I really appreciate y'all coming up and talking about this. But listen, I'm going to tell you something. I've looked at cities around the state. I've never, ever witnessed, and I apologize to the people that live in the city of Atlanta, I've never seen the dysfunction when it comes to the individuals trying to determine this. If we were talking about trash pickup, I'd be a little concerned. If we were talking about potholes, I'd be a little concerned. If we were talking about delivery of services, I would be a little concerned. But we're talking about the public safety of every man, woman, and child in Fulton County. We're talking about people that have gone out and lawfully arrested and are being held in the jail, and they are our responsibility. When I say our, the leaders in this state are responsible for the conditions and the environment that the people charged with crimes, not convicted, charged with crimes, are being held in. And unlike the lady that came up and testified, and unlike the gentleman that came up and testified, I've been in Rice Street. And I've walked the halls and went in some of the worst cells in there by myself, along with Chairman Albers at times, that we went in and looked. And if the dysfunction, pride, and egos are the things standing in the way, then somebody has to be the big person and step up and do what's right. And while I know the best city I've ever represented was LaGrange, Georgia, when Jim Thornton was mayor. And I say that without any bias, absolutely. And in this case, if the city of Atlanta could function as good as LaGrange did, we would not be sitting here today. But I thank you, and I really appreciate you and DJ for coming up and checking on us.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Okay, let me round this out. We sit in our capital city and our capital county. It is the star of the South, the capital of the South, as we like to say oftentimes. It's a place that we get to make all sorts of wonderful laws. We get to give tax money back. Thank you, Governor Kemp and the General Assembly, and all sorts of other good things. I wish we didn't have to deal with this issue, but we do. I have watched in the 30-plus years that I have lived in this local area, the relationship with the city and the county be good, but mostly not so good. Sometimes it is at certain levels, and sometimes it is not good at other levels. I didn't want to have to do this bill, but I am a Fulton County taxpayer. Thank you, Senator Halpern, and I'll join you there. And everyone here who comes to Atlanta is paying an awful lot of taxes when they are spending the night in some cases, they are going out to restaurants and doing everything else. So with that in mind, I think this is wholly appropriate to get this problem solved, and getting back to what our vice chairman and the chairman of our study committee, our subcommittee rather, talked about to begin with. This is about public safety and protecting people. And with that, I would open it up to a motion. Please, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I make motion do pass.
Got a motion do pass. Got a second from Senator Wicks. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All opposed? 2. All right, passes. Best of luck to me and rules. All right, thank you all so much. All right, we're going to move on now. I think this one should be a little more easy for folks. We're going to talk about some license plates, which is something that comes to our committee regularly. We got Senate Bill 84. And I'm actually carrying this bill, but we've got a couple of folks that may want to say a word or two. As you all may know, on a part of the jurisdiction of the Senate Public Safety Committee are things that involve driver services and licensing of cars, et cetera. And last year, I got to work with the good folks at the Shepherd Center. And I'm going to ask Ms. Abigail if you'll come up in a second here, and we'll have you talk. In order to create a license plate, unfortunately, got put on an omnibus license plate bill that ran into a bit of a challenge, and we're going to hopefully correct that. But also adding to this is something that's done in many other states, and something you may all know is very personal to me and my family, which is a special license plate recognizing the importance of organ donation. Those funds will go to the Georgia Transplant Foundation, which helps those families during that time of need, just as the Shepherd Center will go to help out the unbelievable work that they do. So I'm going to ask Ms. Abigail, who's no stranger to the Senate, who began her career, was trained right in Suite 421, to talk about this important license plate.
Yes, thank you so much. Hello, members of the committee. My name's Abigail Thompson. I'm Director of Government Relations and Advocacy for the Shepherd Center. We are a catastrophic injury hospital that specializes in the treatment and rehabilitation of spinal cord injuries and acquired brain injuries. Last year, so we are seeking a revenue sharing specialty plate. We will be celebrating our 50th anniversary in Georgia on August 18th of this year. We're very excited. We could not do anything of what we do without support of our fabulous donors and our foundation, and so the proceeds from this bill will do a great deal to help our patients. Since we have started this process, there is, I noticed, I believe it's on line 20 of the bill, the effective date. We are hoping if the department and if the sponsor and wonderful chairman is amendable to it, we would respectfully ask if you would consider changing the effective date to be July 1 of 2025, opposed to currently written as January 1 of 2026. Other than that, we are fully supportive of this bill. We're very happy to have donate shine light on it as well, and happy to answer any questions.
Well, I think there's one important question that Vice Chairman Robertson has if we're going to move this forward.
Yes, ma'am. I appreciate you coming in here, and I'm shocked. I thought everybody was here to hear your license plate
Me
pitch.
too.
But I just, point of clarification, is it not true that your last name is Garcia?
It is. I forgot to say that. So Abigail Thompson Garcia now.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. I just wanted to make sure for the record that we didn't have somebody using a false name testifying.
Right.
Thank you, ma'am.
No, that's my full name. I'm phasing in the Garcia part. So
We'll make sure you fill out the sign-up sheet properly.
Yes, please.
Yes, I've got a question from Senator Halpern.
Less a question. At the right time, I'd like to make a motion to do pass. I just want to acknowledge that the Shepherd Center does exist in the 39th district, and they do life-saving work and really change people's lives. And they will be celebrating their 50th anniversary this year. And so I'm excited about us hopefully passing this license plate.
I'm going to let you make that motion in a moment, but I'm going to recognize Senator Williams first.
Thank you very much. My predecessor was Rusty Kidd. And just a few years ago, I was able to get the spinal center moved up on getting money from the court system from injuries. And I've been a proud advocate of working hard for you too. And God bless Rusty and his memory. He's gone now, but y'all were very important to him, saved his life. And forever, for that, I am forever grateful for you. Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you.
And I'd like
Appreciate his
motion.
comments.
All right, so we're going to do a motion and a second, then we will do an amendment. So I'll recognize Senator Halpern.
Okay, hold on, because I would like to make a motion, do pass Senate Bill 84, that's LC 394560.
And do I have a second from Senator Williams?
Second.
I got a second. Okay, before we continue, would someone like to offer an amendment on line 20 that our wonderful legislative counsel will help us to scribe? Oh, that's fantastic. All right. Would someone like to actually, Vice Chairman Robertson, would you offer an amendment?
I will, if Ms. Garcia is okay. I'd like the, by deleting line 20 and inserting in following, it will change the line to read, "This act shall become effective on July 1, 2025.
And actually, could we add to that for the Shepherd Center license plate and January 1st, 2026 for the organ donation one, because one is further down the process than the other one? That's what you said, right?
Correct.
Excellent. Do I have a second on that great motion? I got a second from Senator Goodman. Any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. Passes unanimously. So we now have a new bill that has been amended, a new committee substitute. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. Passes unanimously. Best of luck.
Thank
to
y'all
all of us
so
in the
much.
world.
Shepherd Center is so grateful. We
Thank you,
appreciate
Abigail,
everything
for the
y'all
great work
do.
you do. And I want to thank specifically Mr. Austin Gibbons from the Department of Revenue for helping us to work this out. Thank you so much. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I know this was a longer meeting today. Thank you for sticking with us. We are back on our normal committee schedule on Mondays and Wednesdays. We will be meeting on Monday. We have at least one bill coming up, perhaps more, and we will try to get that information out to you right away. And I just want to reiterate that we're going to put the agenda out as soon as possible. If there's a committee sub or something happening, we're also going to try and get that ahead of time so you have time to process and read that. Thank you so much for being here today. This meeting is hereby adjourned.